You know, the anniversary of me being alive. There was some nervous laughter as everyone there thought back to every interaction they'd ever had with Nicole, hoping they hadn't done something stupid. Remember how we used to say that Neanderthals were stupid? And then we discovered through genetic sequencing that white people were part Neanderthal. Then suddenly there were all these documentaries about how smart Neanderthals were. I guess in all these stories, there's a sense of what's supposed to happen, and then what really happens, and then what really happens. But maybe that's just staring into chaos and trying to find order. Staring up at the billions of stars, looking for a pattern, a shape.
Now I'd like to welcome to the stage Aham and Leon.
Welcome. Whoa, hi, how you doing? How's everybody doing? How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great.
Exciting.
Yeah.
So, I did a lot of preparation for this
Okay.
interview. It's very exciting.
I'm ready.
And the more I prepped, the more I had to start over. So I went through 3 evolutions of questions I have for you.
Okay.
And realizing, well, we only have so much time. I'm not going to be able to ask all these questions. So I've narrowed it down to what I think is going to be helpful for tonight. And we're going to jump into it. So don't be afraid.
Oh, okay.
Don't be afraid. If any of you out there have questions or developing thoughts, questions, keep those in mind. We want to know about them. Welcome again to WSLR Fogartyville.
I'm thrilled to be here. It's what a great place.
So I've been engaging with your work digitally, but documentation is never the same as being live and in the room. So I'm looking forward to seeing your live performance. And I want to know what fundamentally changes when the work is live and in the room, not just for the audience, but internally. Does timing shift? Does risk shift? Does the attention feel different in your body?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I think that with this show being a solo show, one thing that's been great about it is I've been able to practice a lot on my own. I've been able to work at home, developing the show over years, doing it over and over again, and basically, I had already performed the show in the solitude of my studio, 30 or 40 times by the time it premiered, but bringing it in front of an audience, especially with comedic elements, with the fact that I come from a background of music and stand-up comedy. Comedy, you can think something is going to go, one way all you want. Then you get in front of a crowd and it's going to be a different thing, no matter what. So it really is. It's a very alive show. It's very different from place to place, from audience to audience. Not in terms of like what is being said, but in terms of, how that interplay goes. I can be saying the same things every show, but it feels very different. And also, again, with the music, nothing is pre-recorded. Everything happens live. So even though everything's very structured and the show is very composed, it still has it feels very different every night.
Yeah, you said, comedy and music kind of go together. They have all, for the longest, musicians being comedians, vice versa, the intertwining of creativity and spark. Does one help carry the other?
I went into both forms with a great love for each of them. And with music, a great love for music. With comedy, a great love for comedy as a lifelong comedy fan. And so I spent a long time not combining them because I really didn't want to combine the things that I love and then have one of them, suffer because of it. I didn't want one thing dependent on another, so it took me a while to get to a place where I felt like I could make something where it's always a goal with my shows to say if I just did this show as a storytelling show, it would stand on its own, or if I just did this as a music performance, it would stand on its own. But together is greater than the sum of its parts.
So I want to talk about the things around us.
I would love to.
So when did this all start?
So the first little seed of this show happened when I had been commissioned by the Meany Center, which is part of the University of Washington. I'm from Seattle originally. And I'd been commissioned to make a work, and then COVID hit. And then suddenly this work that I was going to make for the stage had to be something else. It had to be something that I could put online. And all of my previous work that I've done, working as a musician and as a composer, I always really, had a lot of pride in being able to find these really incredible musicians and put them together and manage personalities. And suddenly in COVID, you can't manage personalities. It's just you and what you're able to do on your own. And so I was really faced with that, when I had this commission. All of my gigs were canceled. I needed to figure out something to do to even make a living. So that's when I started trying to figure out how to make something on my own. And I kind of became obsessed with it, with the idea of who am I when I have no one else? And so I made this, 15-minute piece for that, which was a video piece. And that ended up being what is now the ending song of the show. But then the show as a whole, it really just kind of came to me when my partner Roya and I, who's the producer in the show, we were in New York just seeing a bunch of other shows. I saw a bunch of shows that I really loved. I saw a bunch of shows that I didn't really like. And for some reason, it forced me to think, if I were to make a show right now, what would it be? And I thought about that piece that I'd made, and I thought about isolation and the pandemic and a bunch of different stories that were strange and told a story about life where things don't really go as expected. And within a few days, I just had pages and pages of notes of what this show was. And then it was 2 years of, reverse engineering that, making it into a show.
So right now in this moment, what feels most essential about this piece?
What feels most essential about this piece is the fact that we've been able to, travel and do it so much and bring it to so many different audiences. I've been able to, with it being a solo show, it is a lot more flexible. We can play a lot of different venues. We've been in venues that, basically could only seat, 60 people. And we've been in venues, we were just in Boston at the Paramount, which is a 600-seat theater. And we've just been able to do this show in so many different places for so many different crowds. And like I said, because there is this comedic element, which also has this, which touches on the social issues and not really necessarily political issues, but the ways in which people interact. It's really interesting to bring that to different places throughout the country and in what is a very interesting time. I think everyone would have to agree that this is an interesting time in American history.
I would think the comedy aspect would allow people to kind of relax and open up and be more invested and along for the ride when it comes time to experience what it is you do.
Yes and no. So my background in comedy isn't necessarily in comedy as an art form that is just about fun. I feel like I come from a lineage of comics that also did very difficult work and did work that was challenging both in terms of the art of comedy and challenging in terms of what we allow ourselves to laugh at and how we approach laughter. So it is a show where a lot of the jokes are a little bit more difficult. Now, I think that there's stuff for everybody. I think it's a show that even if every joke wasn't for you or you aren't really sure of how to feel about everything, there's still a lot to enjoy, and it's really I do want to make a show that anyone can come to and get an experience out of. But there is also a lot of kind of challenging thoughts and nuanced thought that is involved in it.
So yeah, I'm jumping around to my questions here. This is great. In a recent conversation, I heard you speak about being comfortable or not being comfortable and making a portion of the audience uncomfortable. It feels less like comedy and more like authorship. How do you decide when to hold that line rather than adjust? Obviously, the answer is yes, but I think you said something like 5% of the audience may not be along for the ride all the time. But why is it okay to make, or not why is it okay, but is it acceptable to lose part of the room in service of something honest?
Yes, it absolutely is, and it would be a disservice to the room to try and cater your work to the room that you're in. I think that it's that one of the beautiful things about what they're doing at the Ringling and at the Hat and what Elizabeth is doing is bringing things to this area that might not otherwise come here and bringing ideas that might not otherwise be present. And I think that with that comes a little bit of discomfort. And I, bringing the show throughout the country, we were in England earlier, and being in different environments, Florida is a very diverse environment in terms of opinions, in terms of people, in terms of things, and this is a place where I feel like I'm bringing the show to a place where all of the opinions are not a monolith. People are very different here, and I think it's very valuable for the people in the audience to hear a variety of opinions, to hear a variety of approaches to both art and to the world.
So as I was doing my research and watching your performances online, I kept thinking, this is resonating, and the word resonating kept resonating. And so the word resonance, keeps coming to mind, not just metaphorically, physically, sound moving through the air, frequency, space. When you're composing, what does resonance mean to you, and is it something consciously shaped, or?
First of all, let me say these are beautiful questions. That really, really great. Really wonderful questions, because that's a lot of what I think about. And when we're going into the theater, and when I'm we're sound checking and we're testing things, I'm doing a lot of it with my ears, but a lot of this show is something that you literally just feel in your chest. That both, musically, a lot of the ideas you just feel in your chest, and that resonance with the room, resonance with your body, resonance with the people around you is a huge part of what the show is about. And it's about the idea that we live together in this place. And I think that resonance, in the most scientific understanding of the term resonance is the sound of the mass of the entire object, of the room with the people in it, of everything that we're saying. So, resonance is an idea that I think about in a musical way, in a physical way, but also in the sense that all our brains are vibrating together. We're all kind of in this same flow, in this same vibration, in this same way of thinking for a moment. Even if we leave the show and you're like, I like some of that, I didn't like some of that, I don't agree with some of that, which there's not really, nothing really controversial in that way in the show, but there was still a moment where you felt connected to both the work and to all the other people in the room.
Yeah, when I was thinking that, I was imagining, like, at one point, I was thinking of the horn and the sounds, and then I was thinking of, like, all of a sudden, the unit, like the galaxy, the sun, the solar system, the sun, the reason that the distance, planets are the distance they are from the sun, it's all resonance.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to move on to magic and mechanics, for some people might not be able to know what the difference is. So there are moments when layers appear and disappear seamlessly, And the process almost feels invisible, but I know it's not. You know it's not. It can feel magical in the room, yet nothing is hidden, okay? So when the moment feels magical in performance, what actually is happening technically on your end, whether it be timing, restraint, layers, silence? Silence is a big one. How do you think about revealing versus concealing the mechanics of the magic?
That is it's one of the most integral things in this show, because this show is a very mechanical thing in terms of the fact that there is nothing pre-recorded. Everything that I'm doing, everything that I'm using to score under the stories are things that I recorded earlier in the show. There are times where I'm telling stories and I'm literally trying to be connected with the audience, adjusting levels here, adjusting levels down there, doing this here, but still staying in the flow of the story the whole time, because it's all real, it's all happening in real time, and the mechanics have to happen. I have to get from point A to point B in order for the show to exist, and that was the biggest challenge of this show. And when I say I locked myself in a room for 2 years to figure out how to make that work, how to actually get from the beginning to the end of the show in just a technical way. How do I push the buttons to make this flow? And from the beginning, exactly that, like, even if you were to look at my notes, is like, I want it to feel like magic. And in order to get something to feel like magic, it kind of has to be the opposite. It has to be just almost like drills. It almost feels like a dance as much as it does like a musical performance, because I have to push buttons at exactly the right time. I have to turn something to the exact right spot. I have to do all of these things exactly right, especially with looping, because if you're looping and you make a mistake, you don't just hear that mistake one time. You have to hear that mistake 75 times over and over again.
It's in there, it's baked.
It's baked in, and there's nothing you can do to take it out, So it's a whole. It is you have to think technically, you have to think mechanically, but the challenge is how do you do everything that you have to do, not hide. I'm not trying to hide that I'm doing it, but also, just really be present with the audience in every moment. And it's just from doing the show 100 times.
And even from little stuff like, taking a moment to light and blow out an incense, while you're getting started. It looks like it's actually almost timed in, but not, it doesn't come off that way, but it's just like, you're not rushing it. It's all part of the process. Like, let me cook.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so moving on to my next question, I want to talk about linking forms. So we've got trumpet, clarinet, electronics, cardboard boxes, the stories. It's just unbelievable. Those are all separate forms of cooperating, Does the overlap create something that only exists in that linking, or is the link where the composition happens?
Well, I think so. In the title, The Things Around Us, implies this idea of, there's a lot of different ways to think about that, but one way to break it down is when the pandemic hit and the external world shut down, you were left with yourself and the things that were around you. Your roommate that maybe I don't like them as much as I thought I did. Like, there's a lot of situations, where you had to make a reassessment about what where you were in space and what was around you. And so when I started constructing the show, I started trying to make the show with the things that were around me. So, I play the clarinet, I play the trumpet, I had cardboard boxes around, I had this tin can shaker. Like, these were things that I just kind of had around, and I spent a lot of time, like, literally just picking up objects and tapping on them to see what they sounded like, to see if that's something that I wanted to, just the objects that were around me. So putting the show together, it's a very limited palette. Like, it's just this trumpet, this clarinet, this box, this can. That's all that I'm using to make the sounds then processed through these pedals and things like that. but it's all kind of that idea of like, making a universe out of simple elements, making as big a world as you can out of these simple things.
Out of the things around us. Yeah. I want to talk about the art and the arc. So a friend recently saw you and submitted some of this thought here. How do you find the right arc? Clearly there's an arc. Was the ending known before the beginning or discovered through the iteration?
So the arc of the show, and there is an arc. It is a strange arc because you don't necessarily feel it while it's happening. It's something that happens in retrospect at the end of the show. Then you're like, oh, there was the arc of the show. And in terms of the ending of the show, and this is something I've done previously in my shows, is sometimes I just like to kind of, in a way, say what the show is about. Kind of remove any ambiguity, kind of just say, this is an idea of what this show is about. This is what I've been talking about in a grander sense. So that idea was definitely there. And then in terms of, it was really just putting these different seemingly unrelated stories in an order that kind of poked around this idea and then allowed me to kind of creep in with this central thought. But also a lot of the way that's determined is, a lot of the pieces of music are built off of the previous piece of music because we're looping, because I don't want to have to create a whole new thing every time we're starting. Sometimes I'll take the song that that we just played and I'll speed it up twice the speed, and then I make something out of that, or I'll slow it down half the speed and we'll make something out of that, so that there are all these different ways that the music develops kind of organically. So it was a real dance of figuring out how to place these stories in a way that works with kind of this natural progression that the music had to work in order to get from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, you just touched on something I'm going to talk about in a moment, and it's the play. But before I move forward, I want to ask about this. One of the things that really got me was the tension that you're able to create. How do you know when that tension is stretched far enough and deserves or is ready to be resolved, has been earned?
I don't know. I love the tension. Some of my favorite comics, they just really like to live in that tension. They like to live in that place of, of what's going to happen. And I find often one of the things that will change from show to show is both my pace and how much time I'm giving the audience to process each idea. And one thing I noticed just the last time I was doing the show, at the last show that we had that was on Sunday, I noticed that there was a whole group of people that were getting all the jokes, but they were getting them all about 3 seconds later. And that's something that I started to kind of play with. I kind of started to play with, okay, now I'm going to say it, okay, 2, now they're going to get it. and we're going to use that tension, and we're going to play with that. And that's one of the beautiful things about comedy, is it's an alive thing. It's an alive interaction with the crowd, even if the crowd's not saying anything.
To those of you out there who are watching out on YouTube and listening, WSLR.org, we are here at Fogartyville in conversation with
Ahamefule J. Oluo.
I was going to say Ahamefule. Was it?
Ahamefule.
Ahamefule J. Oluo. We are streaming live, as I said. The series is presented in partnership with the Ringling and Historic Oslo Theater, The Hat. We've been exploring resonance, immersion, authorship, and structure. And now I would like to pivot towards evolution and process. So when you look back, and again, as I said, I was doing my research and doing a deep dive on these videos that spanned years, right?
Yeah.
When you look back at performances from 10 years ago, what feels constant and what feels transformed?
The thing that feels constant is I feel like there's a thread in all of my work that I don't even know was intentional at the beginning, but the thing that I feel is kind of a constant is that a lot of it is about finding a way to feel okay in the world, regardless of your personal position of the world, regardless of the external position of the world, because you have to go on and you have to move on to the next day, and you have to find a way to feel okay. And that's not saying that, to ignore the realities of things, but a lot of it is to kind of, by processing the chaos of life, we can find some sort of peace in that. And I've found that that's been a pretty consistent thing throughout my work. And even though it can be hard to articulate necessarily what that means, the end result is, what I've found is that a lot of people, after they've seen my shows, they will talk to me about a traumatic thing they're going through or something that's happening in their life, and how it just made them feel better about going through it, how it made them feel better about, like, the moment that they were in. And that kind of connection, and that kind of, any kind of real shift that you can make in someone that means something to their life, I mean, that's why we perform. That's why we get on stage and do this for other people instead of just, have fun in our bedrooms. I mean, musically.
Have you ever made something that technically worked but did not feel true? And how do you detect that? What's the internal barometer?
I'm gonna say honestly, no, because I have this thing that I am so driven by my internal feelings that the second something doesn't feel right to me, I can't do it anymore. To the annoyance of my partners, past and present. Even if it's like a well-paying thing, if something doesn't sit right, that's just kind of the way that I've been. And I would say it was a hindrance for a long time in my career, but now that I'm at a different place and I have a little bit more freedom, I'm really in touch with what I want to do and what something feels like when I'm on the right track.
So I'm sure any of these will be reasons to jump off the track if you don't want to be on it. But when something is not working, what normally breaks first? Structure, tone, clarity, energy?
The first thing that I think of, in Elizabeth's introduction, she was talking about you working with musicians that are neurodivergent and things like that, and I definitely see things in a very specific way, and I kind of see things not necessarily in linear time, which is kind of why this show is not necessarily in linear time. I kind of see things kind of as a whole, like a circuit board or something like that. And what I will usually find is if there's something I can't fix, if there's like a personality conflict going on between people and I'm like, they're not going to be able to resolve that, I don't like to put effort towards things that aren't going to work. That, like, if I can say, okay, this is sounding really good, but this message isn't meaning what I want it to mean, electricity is not going to pass through that circuit. It's not going to come to life. It's not going to be the thing. So anytime I see like what I like to think of as a fatal flaw, that's it for me.
I want to talk about one of the most important things to me that I noticed. Play. When we say the word play, I play the piano, I play the clarinet, I play the trumpet. It's more than just play, but it's also, that is it, but the way that children will play with each other. When you play, when no one's watching and it's just for you, that sense of play comes through, and it's a big part of the magic. How do you feel? Is there space for play, for the sake of play, during a live performance?
I have an amazing time doing this show. I have so much fun. There are moments in the show that are just for me, that are just for me to have a good time. I think that a lot of times the audience feels that and they have a good time during those moments. But there are things that I'm just like, that's really fun for me to do. Like, and that there are definite moments that I think that you couldn't describe as anything other than play in the show, where I'm just being a ridiculous person and being, screaming weird things into the microphone and just doing exactly what I feel like doing, because it's really fun, and that element of fun I think really helps, carry us through some of the heavier moments in the show. And it's also like, we're touring the show. I'm doing the show night after night. The show's better if it's fun for me.
How do you protect playfulness once a piece becomes structured and performed repeatedly?
It's funny. I had to do this show. I got to do this show for a month at the Williamstown Theater Festival in Western Massachusetts, which was a really great experience. But because of the programming of the festival, I had to bring the 90-minute show down to a 60-minute show. So I really had to cut some significant portions of the show. And in order for the show to make sense, in order for it to work, I had to cut a lot of the things that were fun for me. I had to cut a lot of the things that were in the show for me and didn't necessarily contribute to the overall shape or quality of the show. And doing that for a month, I really learned how important those things were. I mean, the show was still great. I think people still really enjoyed it, but I couldn't bring the same thing to it when I didn't have those things that were just for me. And as soon as I got back to being able to do the full show after that, I've just cherished those moments. And if you come and see the show, you'll know what I'm talking about, because you'll be like, what are they doing?
I will be there. So we have a lot of artists in the room. We have a lot of artists watching us on YouTube, listening online. I want to talk about, let's dive into this a little deeper here. When you speak about the process, what do you hope other artists take away? Not inspiration, not career advice, something usable from that you do that works for you.
I was just doing this when we were in Boston before we came here. I was working with students from Emerson College and Berklee College of Music because of my background in both comedy and music. So because of that, they decided to, take some kids from the music school and take some kids from, the TV and film writing programs that they had at Emerson and kind of put them together and have them spend a day together and see what they could make together. One musician, one writer together. And, they all made these under 5-minute long things over the course of several hours. And they had so much fun and they really loved it. And the things that they made were really beautiful. And they made them all in one day. And the thing that I said to them afterward is, this doesn't have to just be in this classroom. As an artist, you can really get sucked into this thing of like, okay, I play the trumpet, I go to my gig, I play the show, I go home, I practice this, I do that. But there can be something so beautiful in the idea of like, I'm gonna make something. I'm gonna make a thing. There's a thing that's in my heart, in my head that doesn't exist, and I'm gonna bring it into the world. Or maybe you don't know what that thing is, but you know someone else who's like a beautiful writer, and you're like, let's make something. And so the advice that I would give to young people is don't just practice, make something. And it may not be good, but even if it's not, you'll learn something, and the next thing will be better.
Did you hear that, folks? Got it. Make something. I think now might be a good time if we have the opportunity, if there's anybody out in the audience here at Fogartyville that has any questions, we'd love to pass a microphone to you and have your question asked, if that's possible. Anybody out there have any questions? We got one right down in the center here. Love it.
Hello.
Hello.
Not to focus on one thing specific, but I'm just curious about your background in music.
Yeah, I mean,
also, what you were listening to when you were creating this show.
Definitely. So my background in music is I'm from the Seattle area, and Seattle is very privileged to have some of the best public music programs, in the country and in the world. And that's really kind of the biggest foundation of musical training wasn't going through high school in a very good music program. I went to 1 year of music college, but I had children at age 19, so I moved out of college and started working as a musician, working as a artist, and also being a father, and then a single father. But just really, all to say, just through immersion, like everything, like I don't have a lot of formal training. It's just I've been doing this since I was 16, and I'm about to be 44 this year. So it's getting close to 30 years of, and it's taken a long time to get to the point where I'm at right now, where I do actually feel comfortable comfortable in the world of comedy and in the world of music and as doing all these things. But being someone who was kind of teaching themselves over the course of 30 years how to do all these things, it really took a long time to feel like I could actually, was good at all of them. Where I think a lot of people that are really good at one thing, they can have a more straightforward path where they can take lessons, they can really be focused. And I kind of did a bunch of things and slowly got better at all of them. And then in terms of what music that specifically influenced this show, there's like one of the first musical segments is really influenced by like New Orleans funeral march. The next movement is really heavily inspired by Nigerian high life music, particularly Igbo high life music, which is the music of my people that I grew up listening to, that feels very much in my body. And then I'm also influenced by Portishead and Radiohead and a lot of more rock oriented things and experimental music. I love Charles Mingus. Charles Mingus is my favorite musician and composer of all time. Duke Ellington, things like that, and a lot of different ideas. But then all of those have to be filtered through the limitations of creating music in this looping environment. So everything kind of becomes a different thing. Even if you take influence from here, the process itself also helps form what the music is.
Excellent, excellent. I thought I saw another hand out there. One more hand? Oh, yes, one do we do?
There we go. Hold on. Hi, I'm going to try to be brief. I saw the show. I was blown away.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. Back to the music. I thought I heard a little bit of South African jazz in there, one of the pieces, maybe not.
I can see that. I'm not sure that that's just in my body. I love Hugh Masekela. I love I love so many of those things. So, I just kind of try and let whatever come out, whatever wants to come out.
Got it. But it was magical.
Thank you.
It was truly magical, and when I hear more about it, I really realize all of the work that went into making it feel very organic and spontaneous. So I really appreciate it even more. On the heels, I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. On the heels of what was just asked, it's this whole, you talked about the storytelling and the music. You were just asked about the musical influences. At the beginning of your talk, you spoke about your lineage of comedians. Could you talk about who those comedians are?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been obsessed with stand-up my whole life. I was a kid that was raised on Comedy Central, and watching, Premium Blend, Comedy Central Presents, and just trying to absorb as many comics as I could. Some of my personal favorites, I was a big Mitch Hedberg fan as a kid. I love some kind of lesser-known comics like Tony Wood is an old black comic that I love. Dwayne Kennedy is an amazing older comic who I have had the privilege of working with, and then but my favorite, Stuart Lee, and I actually mentioned him in the show, and having toured the show all around America, not one person has recognized his name. He's very not known outside of the UK, but in the UK, he's, I think, widely considered one of the greatest comics ever there. So he doesn't really make his work to be consumed by people outside of the UK. So it doesn't always translate as well if you don't know the cultural references. But he's just such a huge influence on me, and in terms of like tension and long form and these kind of difficult jokes, that's a big influence. I grew up on This American Life. I love This American Life. I had the privilege of being on This American Life, which was amazing. And, you know, that kind of story building has always been, you know, appealing to me. So those kind of like, I guess like NPR story building plus, you know, stand-up comic, both as absurdist stand-up comic and more, you know, even more political, a lot of political comics, Paul Mooney, you know, things like that. They all kind of meld together into whatever this is I'm doing.
Last thing, your vinyl hadn't arrived in time on
Yes.
Saturday. Is it arrived?
It's supposed to get there tomorrow.
Okay, so it's not here.
It's
We can't
not
get
here.
it here.
No,
Okay.
it's supposed to get. I wish it was.
Any other questions on the floor?
One more down in the front here.
One of the first things that I noticed was the stacks of boxes on the trailer.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be a spoiler about the show or anything, but what do you use the boxes for?
Well, I use one box musically. I use it as a musical instrument throughout the show, and it provides most of the rhythmic foundation for that. But the boxes, they represent a couple of things, and I have no. I'll spoil the show all I want, I don't really necessarily address it directly, but I don't know about all of you, but there was a moment early on in the pandemic where I felt like my entire connection to the outside world was ordering things, having things dropped off on my porch. My house was just full of boxes because that's the only way I could get stuff. And, you know, I think a lot of people also, they were just bored and were buying things for no reason because there was nothing else to do. So I feel like there's a way in the pandemic that isolation made us feel like kind of trapped in our belongings, trapped because we were already trapped in our house and now we're trapped within the objects of our house. And that idea, combined with the idea that it is very difficult to tour a show, theaters don't really have large budgets right now, and the idea of a set made out of cardboard boxes is very appealing to the institutions that we bring the show to. So it was definitely an idea that happened organically, but then the practical idea of like, you know, we really can't afford to build sets everywhere we go, but this is a way that we can build this big kind of elaborate thing, and it's actually really fun for everyone involved. Everyone has fun building this. It's amazing how easy it is to collect 200 boxes. Like every theater we've been, they tell, you know, the employees, hey, just bring in whatever boxes you have for a moment, and then they'll come in. They'll have, and I think they had like 340 boxes in Boston where we were at, like, and those are just what the people brought in, and it's like we built like a city essentially, and it's this way to kind of recapture. A lot of the show is trying to capture the grandeur, but in this other way. Even musically, trying to capture the grandeur of having an orchestra, but it's not an orchestra. The grandeur of a set, but it's just cardboard boxes, you know.
That's what I thought.
So if you're stuck out there or trapped and you need to, in your creative, you know, make something out of the things around us. That's what I'm taking for this.
Yeah.
I'd like to bring Elizabeth Dowd back up for a moment, if she's out there, to come back and let us know more about what's happening coming next in the Artist Talk series, and where we can find out more information about the performances coming up this week.
Certainly, we have 3 more shows of the things around us this week. Wednesday, tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. Shows are at 7:30 p.m. And after this ends, I'm gonna stand right by the door, and you can come by and scan a QR code if you'd like to RSVP to come to any one of those shows if you're listening. with us online, you can use the code OLUO, OLUO 20 for a discounted ticket at ringling.org. So there's lots of ways to see the show. And artists and students can get $10 tickets, which I think is pretty cool. So we just really want you to come and experience this. I do have to say that the way that this show penetrates your body is remarkable. I think it shakes something loose in many people. Maybe something that's been stuck might come undone in a really good way. And it's just a really great hang with a wonderful person. So I can't endorse it enough. If you want to come back and join us on the 13th of March, we're going to be in conversation with Jake Blunt, who is an amazing musician, a fiddler, and a banjo player, and a scholar of string music, American string music. And yeah, it's going to be a pleasure to be back in conversation with you. Anything else I missed, Leon?
I think that sounds about right.
Okay.
Aham, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Leon. Those were really wonderful questions, and this has been a great interview.
I appreciate your time, your thought, your effort, your energy, your spirit. I'm truly inspired, and I can't wait to see you live.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you guys for being here tonight. Appreciate it.